Last week, Eskom claimed that it had saved a whopping 11.51 billion in diesel. The question is, has Eskom really saved billions in diesel usage, considering how its diesel budget ballooned in just 4 years? We're here to explain and verify.
While Mfundo, Eskom has managed to keep the blackouts at bay for almost 200 days. This uninterrupted power supply since the 26th of March, bringing hope that Power Utilities Generation Operational Recovery Plan is bearing fruit. Today, we will look at how Eskom's diesel budget ballooned by more than 400% in the 4 years from 2020 to 2024. Looking at the numbers, it's hard to imagine that there is a savings part there at Eskom. Let's look at the expenditure of Eskom on open cycle gas turbines, OCGT, within this particular period. You look at 2019, 5.8 billion rands was spent. To go to 2020, 5.75 billion rands was spent on these open gas turbines and burning of diesel. Go to 2022, 8.6 billion rands Mfundo. Go to 2022, going towards 2023. 2023, it was 21.25 billion rands, and then it ballooned to 23.3 billion rands within this particular period of how much gas diesel has been burnt by Eskom, which is a growth of 400%.
Just looking at those figures, it's evident, of course, that the amount spent on diesel is extremely high, especially when we look at the fact that they've consistently relied on the open gas cycle turbines ever so often. And we understand that they spent around 110 million a day on OCGTs at some point.
At some point, yes, diesel expenditure has been one of Eskom's fastest growing expenditures, particularly when you look at the comments of the late Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, earlier in the year. To quote him exactly, he revealed that Eskom spends 65 billion on diesel over the past 5 years to burn for its open gas turbines. So in the past 5 years, Eskom has spent 65 billion rands to burn diesel in the open gas turbines. This equates to over 1 billion rands worth of diesel per month over this particular period. So for instance, if we look at OCJ cost monthly, 5.92 billion rands between the 1st of April 2024 and going to the 3rd of October 2024. Then the average is 980 million rands per month. That is about 1 billion rands that is spent on these open gas turbines and burning of diesel per month. 17.4 billion rands between the 1st of April 2023 and the 3rd of October 2023. Then you can look at the difference between the two. The averaging that would be per month of 3 billion rands spent on the burning of diesel between these particular periods by this particular entity.
But there most certainly looks as though there has been some sort of a decrease, because if we look at 17 billion in 2023 and the 5 billion in 2024, there is some sort of a shift in a positive way?
There is some sort of shift there in a particular positive way when you look at the burning of gas, diesel for these open gas turbines between these particular periods. Between 2023, Mfundo, 17.4 billion rands. Then you go to 2024, 1st of April to the 3rd of October, this particular period, that is about 6 billion rands, rounded off 5.9 billion rands. But let's speak to an energy expert who will particularly give us clarity on this particular matter. Good evening, Clyde Mullison, on this particular matter. Ordinarily, what would Eskom spend on a reasonable expenditure for these open gas turbines for them to perform functionally and optimally in order to ensure energy security within the country?
Hi, good evening. When Eskom built the open cycle gas turbines, they were never really meant to be used for more than about 3, 4, 5% at a maximum. So they're meant to run at peak times, mainly in winter, but also some peak times in summer, in the early evening peak. And they are pretty cheap to build, open cycle gas turbines, but they're very expensive to run, especially if you're running them on diesel. So the rationale is you build them quite cheaply and you run them as little as possible.
And Andre Director, the
Yes.
former Group CEO, claimed that Eskom kept load shedding at bay by burning more diesel. Does he have a point on this particular matter? Because if you look at the issue, or was Andre Director disadvantaged by the fact that he had limited budget as a country to keep the lights on in burning these diesel for these open gas turbines?
So during the bulk of Andre de Ruyter's tenure, load shedding would have been a lot worse had he not burnt diesel. But he certainly didn't keep it at bay. We had some of the worst load shedding in 2021, 2022, and 2023. What needs to be understood is that in our very worst year of load shedding, 2023, on average, we were short of about 1.8 gigawatts or 1,800 megawatts on average. And we burnt on average 3 to 4 times as much diesel as was originally the intention. Now, just one thing to point out, those figures that were quoted to Parliament for diesel expenditure spent by Eskom, that was just for the Eskom OCGT fleet. You probably need to add another 50% for the 2 independent power producer open cycle gas turbines. So in 2023, for example, we didn't spend 23 billion, we spent about 35 billion. 23 was Eskom spending on its own OCGT fleet, and about another 12 billion or so was spent on IPP or independent power producers fleet. But the point I want to make is that, call it bad luck if you like, in 2022, if I recall correctly, in about September, the Kusile flue duct collapsed, and it took out 3 units at Kusile. And those 3 units collectively would have produced about 2,100 megawatts. So the 3 units of Kusile, when you took them out of the system, were greater than the average amount of load shedding we had in that period. And that, of course, was then exacerbated by the fact that Coburg was shut down for refurbishment. So there was a coincidence of bad luck, if you like. And in 2024, in fact, towards the end of 2023, the Kusile units came back online, and that has had a major influence in stemming the amount of load shedding that we've had in 2024.
So what has Eskom done right in order to keep the lights on despite this ballooning expenditure on the burning of diesel for these open gas turbines?
Okay, so the expenditure has been much less in 2024 than it was in 2023, as your figures show. What Eskom has done correctly is that they brought Kusile back online. And the bringing back of Kusile, just by itself, was virtually enough to stem load shedding. So, yeah, that's what's happened. And it's a little bit disconcerting at the moment. You may or may not be aware that during September, the 1 unit of Eskom of Coburg that is operational at the moment, while the other one is being refurbished, actually went down for a period of about 10 or 12 days. And it was during that period that diesel usage started to climb back to the levels that it was running at in 2023. So the Eskom OCGT fleet was running at an average daily rate of about a 20% capacity factor, as opposed to a 2 or 3% capacity factor that it's been running at since March, when load shedding ended. So we're still definitely not out of the load shedding woods. It's a very delicate balance between having sufficient, and when you have sufficient, you can charge up your storage and release it, and charge it and release it. When you drop just below having enough, that's when it gets tight, because then you're reluctant to use your storage because you know that you can't fill it again. And so we came pretty close to having load shedding last month. And we managed to stave it off, if you like, by burning diesel at peak times, but also by the fact that there has definitely been a reduction in demand in the country, and there's been a bit of an upsurge of solar on rooftops. So the demand, as seen by Eskom, has basically decreased by about 500 megawatts from what it was last year.
In 30 seconds, when you look at the failures of Eskom and how South Africans are scared that load shedding may resurface again, particularly noting that just this particular month in September, you had that particular cold front, you had the snow in provinces such as the Free State, Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. What are the mitigating factors and risks that Eskom can avert of any occurrence of load shedding once again?
I don't think they're really in a position to avert it. When you're sitting with a fleet that's not particularly predictable, they've improved the performance of the fleet, but because we're so close to having sufficient supply to meet our need, it's very, very tight. And I keep stressing that during this period of no load shedding, all the stops should be pulled out to build new capacity, so that when we start seeing problems with the coal fleet again, or when we start decommissioning them as per schedule, we've actually put in place replacement generation to avoid a repeat of annus horribilis or whatever it was of 2023, where we saw that crippling load shedding that was very damaging to our economy.
In 2 seconds, when can we see the government implementing the issue of the nuclear power station that was gazetted and then withdrawn by the Minister of Electricity and Energy?
I think when it's shown that it is prudent and that it would make financial sense, and I'm not sure that that will ever happen.
Thank you very much for taking our questions and engaging us on this particular matter of the power utility. Mfundo, you can see that the diesel expenditure in the past financial year has decreased a bit because of the units that were brought on stream in order to provide electricity, particularly that coal-powered station that has spent a number of years being built but not yet completed. That would be Kusile.
So those 2,100 megawatts have most certainly had a positive impact on the generation. But beyond that, it seems that Eskom's recovery plan is quite the one that many have been raving about, because they've been able to at least keep load shedding at bay since the 26th of March.
Indeed, Mfundo, the current management team of Eskom has undoubtedly performed very well. And here are some of the key points that contributed to Eskom's good performance in the past years of this particular team. When you look at this particular slide that we will show you now, before this one of Petro SA, you look at the good efficiency that Eskom had on these particular matters. You look at accelerated maintenance program that the power utility had. You look at close cooperation with good original equipment manufacturers. Close cooperation with good original manufacturers, high staff morale that is there within the power utility, and the energy availability factor averaged 63% year on year from 52% over the same period. So look at these points again: operational efficiency, accelerated maintenance program, close collaboration with original equipment manufacturers, OEMs. That is one point that the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Hosianso Ramokgopa, has stressed, that all generating units of the coal fleet, they must pay particular attention to all of these particular units on an individual basis. You look at a power station like Kendal Power Station, one of the worst performing power stations that Eskom has, but in the past 3 months or so, you saw the Minister of Electricity and Energy going to Kendal Power Station saying that they have performed very well and optimally.
Now, if we speak of energy availability factor, what are some of the power stations that have performed fairly well, Samken?
Let's look at this particular slide of power stations that have performed very well within the coal fleet of Eskom. You've got Kusile Power Station at 70%. You've got Majuba Power Station at 70%. You've got Camden at 70%. You've got Duva at 81.9%, basically at about 82%. And that, Mfundo says, while Eskom's achievement of the 11.5 billion in diesel savings coupled with the 197 days of uninterrupted power supply marks a turning point for the utility, the diesel budget was extraordinarily high in the first place. There is hope that diesel budget will return to normal small allocation. That will be a real savings on the diesel budget allocation. That will be the real savings on the diesel budget allocation that the power utility is hoping to do. You saw the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises visiting the power utility this week, and they are expected to make about a loss of billions of rands due to municipalities failing to pay the power utility on time. You look at a municipality like Tshwane that is in court right now, over 5.2 billion rands that is owed to the power utility.
All right, my colleague there, Samkele Maseko, explaining and verifying Eskom's diesel spend.